Karen, you're from Corvallis, Oregon. Now, how did you get to California?
It's funny, I just was in Corvallis last week. I took my husband up to see where I was born, and I found out why I left.
Why is that?
There's nothing there. It's all beautiful, and it's natural, and they're keeping it lovely and unsullied, and there's not even a Walmart. But I came to think that maybe a Walmart was okay. Just like the last thing I'd ever hear myself saying. It's just there's no culture in the kind of things that I need. I went back to the art department on campus, because that's where I took my first art classes, and the art on the walls hadn't changed. And you know, the cultures of virtue, like Corvallis, which was a place where everything was always nice and people always looked the same and didn't do anything that would attract too much attention, don't make interesting art because they're afraid of change. And when you hold on to your history and you hold on to your good nature and your fine intentions, good art doesn't get made. And you know, I used to read novels when I lived there. I was a typical child of the country where, you know, living in a garret in Paris was what I wanted to do. You know,
do you think that that's true with any sort of small town or outlying town where there's no good art producer? And the thing that comes to mind is like Claremont, or that area that has a very active art community, but it's not mainstream. So you feel that it has to be in a big city.
Oh, no, I think you have to have access to a big city. I mean, I taught, actually, when I left Oregon to go to graduate school, I went to Claremont. And I went there for 1 year before I decided I needed to be at UCLA in the city, because Claremont was actually too much like Corvallis. On the other hand, I think it's up to the spirit of the students who go there to get themselves into LA and to look at art. And if I did do that, the minute I got to Claremont, I went to LA every weekend. And it became a journey. And I mean, I think that good art can get made in these places, but I think that it has to be made by going away and coming back. Like, I was looking at a bunch of Oregon Northwest Coast painting at Portland Art Museum last week, and all the work is sort of saturated with the non-color you find up there, which is gray, green, brown, and ochre, because it's a rainy climate. And there are all these really very terrible, drab landscapes that have been going on there for years. Then I walked around the corner and there was a Shield Hassam painting of Mount Hood of Portland, and it was beautiful. It was Portland in the sun with a shining white mountain, and it's sort of like the people who went away or visited managed to find the color in the place, whereas the people who lived there didn't find the color. And I think I came to the conclusion that if you live away from a cosmopolitan area, you have to have the kind of mind that looks for the eccentric or the wild or the perverse or the weird in the culture you're in. You can't embrace that part of it that keeps it sort of nice to live in. And so if you're sort of a badass person living in a nice little town, you're more than likely going to still be able to make good art.
Right. Had you thought about moving to New York because, quote, supposedly that's the center?
I did live on and off for 6 years in Soho, so I did go to New York. And
when was that?
That was from about 78 to 85, I guess. And I was sort of going back and forth, but the last 3 years I was there the whole time. And it was, you know, it was like being in a candy store. I used the museums the way that, you know, people use the bus. You know, I just went to them every day. But for me, it was the final catch-up for growing up 20 years in Oregon where I didn't see any art. So that was the splendid part of it. And but the interesting part of being there as opposed to being here, and the reason I came back here and like it so much, is that New York has a kind of restrictive sense to making art, and it has to do with the primacy of intellect and the idea that if you live in that city, you you need to be rigorous, and you need to follow the kind of cosmopolitan rules of being intense and being intellectual. And there's an overriding, although people who live in New York would never agree with it, but I felt there was an overriding attitude of there was the right thing to do and there was the wrong thing to do. And when I came back to LA, I realized that you live here and there doesn't seem to be any right or wrong thing to do.
Yeah.
You know, and there's a kind of permission that comes with the West that the East doesn't have. And growing up in the West, that's the thing that I've grown to appreciate the most, is that, you know, you even have the metaphor for that with the big, huge open skies, which are ultimately the large negative space that can be filled with art, can be filled with ideas.
When you were living in New York, did you find that it really got in the way of your painting?
No, because I was sort of busy making painting about living there. So, which is what I always do. I make work about where I am at the moment and what's going on. And I think the only thing that got in the way of making my work there was whatever tendencies I had toward my inferiority of being from the West, you know, that I wasn't that well educated and that I was sort of catching up with things I didn't know. And, you know, I'd be at a dinner party and someone would go on and on about, you know, Tintoretto and Tiepolo and people I knew, but I didn't know them well enough that I could enter really sustained conversations. And I remember one night, there was a dinner party and a question about Shakespeare came up, and this man said, "Oh, Karen, well, go get your Shakespeare and we'll check it out." Well, I didn't happen to have my Shakespeare because it was out here actually. And he was just, you know, that was it for me. That was like the big, you know, you're finished.
Yeah.
And so I think that a lot of people from the West have bought the idea that we don't have the right kind of credentials. And I would, if I went back to New York now and lived, I would never have that problem. I would just be who I am, and I would not fall for that kind of pressure. But anyway, it was fun. I enjoyed every bit of it. It was great.
You've also been a teacher for at
25 years.
At
30,
all at
actually.
Otis?
Oh no, I only taught at Otis, I think, for one semester. I taught at UCLA, UC Irvine, UC Santa Barbara, Claremont, Art Center, Otis. Where else? There's got to be another one in here. I guess that's about. Oh, and I did teach a semester at Bard when I was back east. So I've taught everywhere.
Did you find that when you were teaching, Karen, that it interfered with your own personal creativity? I mean, your painting, because you concentrated so much and put so much into teaching.
It cut into the time I had to make work, but it never. If anything, it really was good for my work, because when you teach, at least if you teach the way I do, which was half teacher and half sort of cheerleader and coach, you know, is that if you spend every day telling a group of people all the most enlightening and energizing things that you've learned and know about making art in your life, the words go back into your own head too. So I think what would happen is that you know, you'd talk about being fearless. I mean, I would talk about being fearless. I'd talk about doing what you had to do, and I'd show work from everywhere from kitsch all the way up to the Renaissance, and I was always pulling slides. And so I sort of educated myself in the sense that I began to take all the periods of history and begin to put them all together and find out what the similarities between all great art is and what the passions are. And so I really not only educated myself, but I also gave, I guess, energy that I gave to myself too. And then when I quit teaching 3 years ago, I realized that the students were people that I really was very fond of. I mean, they gave me a lot more than I thought they did. And, you know, they were optimistic and young and energetic. I mean, I started teaching when I was 24 or 25. And in all those years I taught, unless I walked by a mirror, I always thought that I was their age. You know, I'd kind of go in the bathroom between classes and I'd look in the mirror and go, oh my God, who is this person? I thought I was 25. But it was
Mistake.
fun. Mistake.
Don't look in the mirror.
Don't look in the mirror, yeah. But anyway, I really, I miss teaching. I miss the students. I didn't take their ideas, but it was hard sometimes not to.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, yeah, they had good ideas.
Would you ever consider doing it again on a part-time?
Oh, yeah.
Part-time?
Definitely, yeah. Because I think it's good to continue to find out what's happening, and you know, especially to find out what kind of music people are listening to. You know, just all of the stuff that when you are older, if you don't make an effort, you don't know. And the thing is, I can't, you know, I don't want to go to clubs. I don't want to go to the places where you can find out what young people do because they're tedious to me. So this was an easy way to get it, you know. I tried to teach people to really be observant and really use their eyes in the way that every day is kind of a session with looking at things and being curious and having interesting things show up. So, because it's remarkable that, you know, conceptual art came along and sort of declined visual life for a while, and I think that I'm back in the world before conceptual art to a certain degree. If you really spend a lot of time looking and seeing how your life is changed by your environment, your art is going to change frequently, if your life does. And one of the things that I learned when I was a young feminist in Los Angeles is that one of the more unattractive things about becoming a mature artist is that you were responsible for doing the series that you did, you know, 10 big canvases that all sort of were the same size and they all had a certain kind of signature to them, and that artists would spend a lifetime, you know, honing one way of working. To me just seemed disastrous because I just felt like, you know, this week I felt different than last week, and that if you woke up in the morning and you'd been working on a big bunch of lugubrious black oil paintings because you were really sort of down and you felt like you wanted to be inside yourself and minimal, and all of a sudden you went outside and there was a carousel outside and like people, clowns running around and the sun was shining, that you may not want to go back in the studio and do those black canvases. So I've always done work that sort of traced my very personal life, but I've never made art that was about personal revealing. I mean, I don't do surrealism. I don't do work that has to do with whatever victimized feeling I might have had in my life, or what. I mean, I don't like to advertise the intimacies, but I do like to work from the realities of my day-to-day life. And the zippers I did when I was in grad school, and I'd come from Oregon, and minimal art was very big, and I was young, and young artists want to be where it's at, you know. So I thought, I want to make it minimal, I want to make it structural, I want to make it black and white, I want to poke fun at the New York heavyweights, the male community. So I decided I would sew it, you know, as a gesture toward feminizing all of that hard-edged heavyweight stuff. And it had
nothing to do with Oregonians being so zipped up.
No, it had a little to do with tents. We camped a lot when I was a kid, and I loved the big zippered doorways and tents and stuff. So that was there, and I had always sewn. And then when I had my MFA show with the zipper pieces, I made a dress that the arms zipped off and the skirt zipped up and the top, it was all made out of canvas and zippers. So. And
now it's very trendy because of those shorts and the pants, you know.
Yeah, I had fun. I looked just like my art. But see, if I look back on that work, that was because I wanted to be glamorous, I wanted to be hip, I wanted to be funny, I wanted to be serious. These were things that you did or at least I did when I was a young artist, you know. I wanted attention. And then there were times in my life where my shyness would show through, or something in my life would be going on where I didn't really feel I wanted that, and I would do different kinds of art. But you know, if I look around at everything I've done, even though everybody thinks I've jumped around a lot, the way these images are made and composed, and the shapes I use and the colors I use, is that it all
They're all related.
Very much related,
Yeah.
because there's a certain kind of aggression I like in images, and there's a certain kind of glamour I like in them, and attractiveness, and which a lot of it comes from having been grown up very shy and very, very sort of internal. And I decided the one thing I could be extroverted with would be my art, and so it's always been a very sort of externalized and flamboyant looking kind of stuff, because that's sort of not the way I feel inside. And one of the things I always told students is that make work out of the part of you that is the best part of you. And if you have to grouch around at home and you have to think about suicide and starve yourself and be unhappy, do that. But when you make your work, make an attempt to make a brave new world, because art is the one kind of thing that transforms the moment. It changes how you feel toward the world. And that's the kind of magic that art is that it can make you wake up one way and go to sleep a different way after you've been in the studio. And I feel that it sounds a little too aggressively spiritual and all of that. I don't mean it that way. I mean it's a very functional way to approach a life. It isn't like, oh, you transform into unicorns and rainbows and everything's happy. You just change the way the day is. And it's really very straightforward and functional. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why artists become so addicted to making things, is that you go into the studio and you don't have to be who you were when you didn't feel so good. So it's not therapy, it's enlightenment.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But there's a great difference, isn't there?
Yeah. Yeah.
Were you terribly involved in the feminist movement during the feminist
I was terribly involved. I was pissed off. Well, you know, you come to LA as a young woman from the sticks and you look around to see what's happening and you perceive the art scene. And in LA, it was all those handsome guys with the neat cars who lived in Venice, and they owned the town. And it was a little disconcerting, because the first thing you did is you tried to date them, you know, because you could get some attention for going out with those guys. But then you realized that that wasn't getting you anything as an artist. And you know, it's a town of beautiful bodies and young people, and I think it was a perfect place to be a feminist, because you had to be. I mean, there wasn't any choice. I didn't choose to be an academic feminist in the sense that I didn't feel my imagery had to be specifically feminist, but I felt that my activities and what I represented myself as needed to be distinctly feminist. Mm-hmm. And I was tough. But I also really, there were differences with myself in the reigning feminism of those days, is that I didn't think that women should give up their sexuality and their attractiveness and their relationships with men in order to be a feminist. I felt a little more the way my women students have been in the last 10 years, is that you should have it all. Exactly. That you can, you know, go out and look like you want to go to bed with a man and get a job too, you know.
Exactly. And I'm so jealous of this, of the...
Yeah, I know. They get to come at it from a much more wholehearted point of view.
And honest.
And honest, you know? Yeah. We had to do a lot of struggling and giving up. And of course, any revolution requires that, and you do sacrifice some things. And I think I sacrificed having a decent personal life. Yeah. You know, I didn't have kids. I didn't have sustaining relationships. I was angry all the time. And, you know, and I always was sure someone was going to take away what I deserved to get. You know, so they were just ways of behaving that I find, looking back on, kind of sad. So.
Yeah. Well, I think everybody has to go through it in one way or another. You know.
Yeah, definitely.
It's all part of growth. And inner growth. You know?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And power.
Yeah, right.
First and foremost.